Welcome to the Cloudless Mind podcast about neuroscience, non-duality, and change management. Introducing your hosts, Paul Smit and Scott Byrd.
Well, hello again, and welcome to the Cloudless Mind podcast. Paul Smit and myself, Scott Byrd, are your hosts today, and we are really looking forward to discussing the concept of change today. Paul, I'm going to actually throw it to you a little bit because you do so much speaking in this world of describing to folks, where and how change arises. You do that through your talks. You do that through your work with different companies. So I'd love it if you can sort of give a primer of how you think about change and how you create these presentations with change in mind.
What is funny about the human being that we are not really aware about the programming of ourselves. So the narrative in our head, it's the latest part of the brain. It's called the neocortex. That's the part that enables us to think, to plan, to oversee complex issues. And we mostly think that if we have a plan, that it will succeed, not knowing that there are older parts of the brain which are way stronger that actually overrule our good intentions. So you see, that's in the Netherlands, approximately 70% of all change management fails because all they do is create plans and rules and protocols and nothing happens. So to me, it starts with the understanding about what is a human being and how are we programmed.
All right, so let's take that from there. How do you, in your presentations, describe this?
Well, I normally, in my presentations, I start explaining about our three-layered brain. We do not really have three layers, but we can divide it in three parts. And it's really important to understand the functionality of those three layers because your reptilian brain, the oldest part, is just focused on surviving, and it just focuses on doing everything from out routine. So it doesn't like change. It wants to stick to its routine for a very good reason. It wants to save energy. And in the old days, you had to save as much energy as possible, like lions do, for instance. They rest, and then if they have to hunt or if they have to survive, they use their energy. And that's what we did. And that part of the brain still functions the same. So the oldest part just wants routine. The middle part is called the mammalian brain. It focuses on saving energy. So it wants to be as lazy as possible. It wants to gain as much pleasure as possible and avoid pain and effort. And then there is the neocortex, the latest part of the brain, as we call it, the human brain. And that's where we can think, we can make plans. But it's like on January the 1st, everyone has good intentions. I'm going to quit alcohol, I'm going to do sports, and I'm going to be nicer to my wife, It's a good intention, but the older part of the brains are way stronger. And if you do not know the programming of yourself, you are more likely to fail in your attempts to change.
So if I'm hearing you right, simply the understanding of these different parts of your brain and the functions that they have, and really having that be, it's almost like you're looking at a machine. There's a automaticity to each part of this brain that if you're not aware of this, it's running you, right?
It's like we're using a computer without knowing the functionality of it.
So what would have, so I'm assuming that what you're doing, and obviously what I do, but we're speaking like this right now, it would be that your intention is to create an awareness of, hey, look, this is actually going on. And that would be your first approach to how you can create change in any part of your life or organization. Is that correct? It's like understanding that you've got a group of machines that are looking to work together, and typically none of us have any idea how these machines are working. We're just all together and almost like chaos to some degree. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, true. It's like 10 people having a meeting about change, and they're all 10 have got no clue about who they are, how they function, and they just come up with nice ideas, but it simply doesn't work.
Yes.
So it's like you also often describe it as patterns,
Right.
because when you were working on Wall Street, all you had to do with are patterns, right?
Right. And like you mentioned, when I worked on Wall Street, when I had my the group that I ran, we it was always neutral. The patterns, there was no charge around them. They just were what they were. We would deal with them as they were, and we would make decisions based on a pattern that we had noticed over and over and over, and without charge around it. Like but you could probably see within a business meeting or a group meeting that there's a tendency for when these patterns are shown or illuminated by someone else, there's something that happens there that people really, in a lot of ways, don't like that. Talk a little bit about that. What would happen, when you get all these people together and it would have people resistant to this change? I know you spoke a little bit. I think it's worth going a little deeper so we understand why it is so tough to change.
Yeah, well, logically, the brain is focused on saving energy. So if people tell you you have to change, there will be resistance. It's totally logical and understandable. So in order to change, all three parts of the brain need to collaborate. And that actually only happens in two circumstances. One is passion, and the other one is urgency. So you see it with young people when they are so passionate, for instance, about playing the guitar. Normally, the brain would resist playing guitar because you play guitar as well. It's really hard in the beginning. You have to use your left hand, right hand, and the right rhythm and the right chords. It's difficult. So normally the brain would say, it's a lot of effort. It's not my routine. I quit. But the amazing thing is when there's passion, then these things have been overruled. And then, you and I did the same. We kept practicing and therefore we could play guitar. So you change from our passion. And the other one is what a lot of people can experience, urgency. So mostly people change the most due to the tough times in their lives. You had a burnout, you got sick, you lost someone who was dear to you, you got a divorce. All those tough things, they trigger the brain and then you have to change. That's actually the survival mode of the brain. So it's either passion or urgency.
So yeah, we both work deeply within these two ideas because we both really are oriented towards the odds of change are very low if one of those two things isn't present. So like if we're together working with a company or we're working with anyone, it really would behoove us to look deeply like, is one of those things present? Is it present? Because if not, we probably ought to address why it's not present before we go deeper in trying to make all these different changes. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, so true. So if people are comfortable and they're okay and it's easy, then there will hardly be any change because there's no drive inside the brain in order to change. So first of all, see if you can trigger someone's passion. That's by if you can find the intrinsic motivation of someone, if you can create more commitment by asking people, how would you like to solve a problem, for instance, instead of demanding like you have to do it. So by asking, you increase passion. And the other one is what you can do is urgency, which also means disruption. So it is better to adjust your environment to make yourself or other people change than to give them protocols to change. So for instance, if I want to do more sports often, I should have my running shoes be standing next to the front door. So I have to do as little effort as possible to start running. And for people who want to quit alcohol, just take all your alcohol out of your kitchen and put it somewhere in the shed or on the attic or whatever. So you increase the amount of effort that you have to do in order to get it.
Right.
So, and that's also something hardly any companies do actually. And they work way better.
Yeah, it's not very common that we think that our brain is doing something because it's trying to save energy. It doesn't occur for us that way. There is so much that comes before that we never actually even consider that there's this contraption in our brain that's trying to work like an efficient machine. And by us believing so many of our, so much that's going on that gets in the way of us actually seeing that.
Absolutely. That's why I think we prefer to focus on the patterns. So how the patterns working, and then after that, due to the insight, you can just make adjustments to make things easier. But normally what happens when you get 10 people in a room who do not understand their programming, there will be a lot of cognitive dissonance, as we call it in psychology. So people will tell with their neocortex all kinds of stories, filled with excuses, filled with stories about why things didn't happen or why they did happen. So it's a lot of blah blah in companies, and that's due to the lack of knowledge.
I will point out that there is certainly usefulness in some of the personality tests that are out there. They give us some picture into the patterns of certain human beings. So I don't want to discount that, because I know that that's something out there that people do use.
Yeah, but that's also like understanding your patterns. Because for instance, like you and I, we are aware that we've got an above average amount of dopamine, which means all day long, our brain gives us impulses, gives us ideas, gives us creativity, and we're very driven due to that. But this also means when I have the knowledge that this is my programming, that whenever I have to make a decision, that sometimes it's better just to think it over for 2 days than to be too impulsive like I normally am.
Right.
So, and like with Arno, my new manager, he's big time testosterone. So, but for him, he's really aware that he's dominant, that he's very charismatic, and that he just walks over other people. So sometimes he's now aware, like, okay, maybe I should shut up for 2 minutes, listen to people and see how they feel. So we have all got our strength and our weaknesses with us. But if you're not aware of that, you just continue following in your routine that doesn't work that well often.
Yeah, and not only that, it can actually start to feed in, and without this awareness, it feeds back into, like, let's use Arno for an example. If he wasn't aware of this kind of chemical drive that works within his machine, then there's a high probability that after maybe he causes some type of mess in the world, or pisses someone off or something, and then the next thought that comes over there is sort of this, why did I do this? What's wrong with me? Why can't I control myself? This, and this.
So true.
And it filters down into this deep despair and guilt and shame. And then all of a sudden we're in this chaos of the mind.
Yeah.
And if we just had some awareness, like, hey, look what this thing's doing again, the ability to step back. And from that place, that's when the possibility of change can actually occur, when we break the chain of the automaticity of the patterns.
True. And it just starts simply with an insight about your patterns. Because and that's also, we'll go deeper in that in other podcasts, like the question who you actually are, because we can go way deeper in this down this rabbit hole. But it starts with looking at your patterns, and from there change automatically happens often, just due to the awareness of it, instead of creating more rules, creating more control, etc.
If I say this once, I say it 10 times a day. There's quite often when I'm working with my coaching clients, I just got out of one 10 minutes ago, and one of the main things that we do, we begin each session with a looking at patterns. We look at what we'll call clouds in our book. We'll simply look at it, and we absolutely are going to do nothing about it.
Yeah.
Meaning we're not looking to go and create some strategy, or I don't give him some prescription how to not have clouds or how to have better clouds or something like that. No, it's simply the awareness of it does all the work. And that's really hard in the beginning for folks, because we've been so trained to do things. But in actuality, this thing that we've been trained to do is the thing that prevents change in the long run.
Yeah.
If you're awake to what we're talking about. This idea of simply of being aware has this miraculous effect that could cause a pause next time you're within one of these swirls of activity.
to me, it's also fascinating that everything in this universe is constantly changing.
Right.
You know, billions and billions of things, and that all goes automatically. But we are the only funny creatures that say, all right, I am in full control of this change.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like in this room that I'm sitting in right now. I mean, there is enormous amounts of change just happening. It looks like it's not. But in actuality, if you were to see it, it's everything is moving, everything's changing. But yeah, we're oriented around really a false narrative in many ways. And
yeah, it's like the wind is blowing and a company is just trying to get control of the air, you know? It's,
exactly. Yeah. Now, but we don't want to dismiss the idea too that there is a desire to create change.
Yes.
Like change is the thing that has the seeming progress in life, society, and all of that. So we want to make sure that we're addressing, what we came on. What does actually have change become, in a fertile environment for change. So why don't we, as we end this, let's make sure that that's really clear, and then we'll end it there.
To avoid any misunderstandings, I'm not against creating an overview, controlling certain things in a company. That's necessary. You need to have control over your finances, etc. But to me, it's always stay flexible, because everything is in constant movement. So don't be too stubborn in these things. Everyone knows this, because if 10 years ago people would have shown you just a few fragments of what your life looks like at this point, you didn't know. And within 10 years you still don't know.
Yes.
So everything is in constant movement and we simply don't know. And in between that, we try to control a few things, which is fine, but sometimes just let it be.
Yeah, that's just happening too. And again, for another podcast. Yeah, I love what you said, and I'll end on this. And it really it's a guiding principle for me, especially when taking on new clients, new situations that I'm going to get myself into. The very first thing that I do is I help myself and the client get clear on where on the spectrum of either passion or urgency are they.
Yeah.
If we're lying, like, let's say somewhere in between there, I'm upfront that it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to engage with me or with you, and mainly because what we're going to do is we're going to challenge the brain in a way that they've probably never experienced it before. And if they don't have an openness from either urgency that's been created because they have to, or the passion because they just can't get enough of discovering what's possible in life, the odds of us having success with them and change, I would say, is incredibly low.
Can you conclude this podcast with your analogy of the house that's on fire?
Yes, sure. Well, one of the I use this quite often, and any client that's listening this will know this. So I use the analogy of a burning house. So imagine yourself in a house, and you're in this house, and just there's no one else in it. There's not any valuables you need, and you're just sitting there watching the television, and you realize that there is smoke and fire coming on either side of you in the rooms on either side of you. And my question to the client or someone in front of me would be, what do you do? What is it that you do then? It's a pretty simple answer.
Run, Forrest.
Yeah. You get out, and it's you don't at that time. So there's a real sense of urgency at that time, and so you're not going to be in a place where you're going to go in the corner and do a breathing exercise or go look up on the internet how to most successfully get out of a burning house. You don't call your coach and go, look, I'm thinking about getting out of this burning house. Can you give me the best way? You don't think, should I skip? Should I do back handsprings to get out of the house? How should I get out of here? No, the urgency drives you and leaves you open to anything possible to get out of the house. So this is not the way typically that human beings operate. They operate from a whole nother level, meaning not from urgency or passion. So that's really important for us to determine whether or not they're in a burning house or not, in my work.
Great analogy.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Paul. We will end it here today. And for anyone that would like more information about what we're up to, you can go to cloudlessmind.com or Amazon. We have our book called A Cloudless Mind. So we'd love for you to engage with us there, or go to our YouTube channel, which is something that we are highly committed to developing and being a useful resource for anyone that would either listen to this podcast or really anyone in the world.